What's up everyone, Mike here from The Art of Guitar, here just with a really quick video about string gauges. And I used to play in 10 gauge all the time. I grew up doing that ever since I was probably 13. I've been playing 10 gauge strings. And I joined this Heart tribute band, that's why I'm wearing this jacket. This is what I wear on stage, so don't tease me. What I noticed is a lot of their songs have crazy bends in them. So right away, like Magic Man has a two-step bend right off the bat, and there's some times where I have to do bends with the first finger only. So I decided, why don't I just try to go to 9 gauge strings and see what happens. Seemed like a really good idea, lighten your string gauge and you could do your bends easier. Everything's going to be a little bit less effort. But what I didn't realize were the unintended consequences, which I was going to talk to you about today. So when I did switch to nines, the first thing I noticed is that even though I had it set up right and everything was good to go at first, when I got on stage, I was getting weird buzzes in certain places that I wasn't used to. So a lot of that's because of my style. And sometimes when I strum really hard just because I'm excited or whatever on stage. So I'd play even just some open chords and I would hear funny buzzes every once in a while. And this guitar was set up as well as it could possibly be, but I was still getting some strange sounds. And like I said, a lot of that was on the fat strings, and that was because of the way I pick personally. So at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about finding the right gauge for your style, the way you play, so stay tuned for that. A lot of people talk about Stevie Ray Vaughan using 13 gauge and how awesome his tone was because of it. I did notice a little drop off in tone when I went down to 9 gauge, but I don't believe it's necessarily all because the strings are thinner. I believe it's because when I was playing and I was getting those buzzes, it kind of freaked me out to where I didn't want to play as wide open as I usually do. So because I held back quite a bit on stage, I noticed a drop off in my tone. And like I said, it's not all about the string size. It was because it affected the way I played to avoid the things that the 9 gauge strings were now causing, which were the buzzing and a couple other things I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So drop off in tone, I can notice just a little bit, but like I said before, a lot of that was due to my apprehension of playing lighter strings because of what I was used to my whole life. My friend Jeremy, who's an awesome guitar player, was talking about early on when I first met him, how he likes to play guitars that kind of fight him back a little bit. And I really didn't understand that because back in the day I was playing a Paul Reed Smith and everything was so easy to play. I used tens on that guitar. It has a shorter neck, so it was a little bit still easy to bend and everything. But I just didn't understand the concept of something fighting you back. I thought, man, being on stage, playing live is freaky enough without your guitar actually causing more trouble for you. But I think I finally realized what he was talking about when I did go to 9 gauge strings. Things just felt a little bit too easy. So I would do a bend and it was just a little too easy to get there. I wasn't used to that. It's kind of like, you're used to running and feeling the floor under your feet. Well, imagine if all of a sudden you were a little bit, you were floating instead of running on the ground, and you just wanted to feel the traction of your feet touching something. Well, when I played 9 gauge strings, I felt like I was floating a little bit. So I'd be playing a lick and it was a little bit too easy. And it kind of changed the way I was playing. Like I said before, it affected me in a lot of weird ways. And I actually lost a little bit of confidence when I was playing because I had to look down to check that I was still playing sometimes because it just felt a little bit too easy. So that can happen if you go down to a lighter gauge string. I was surprised that it happened that much just going down from tens to nines though, but it did happen. So personally, I know that I want a little bit of fight back when I play the strings on the guitar, just so I can feel that they're there. It's a good grounding sensation that makes me more comfortable, and then I don't have to think about it. I could just play. This one's more psychological on my part, but when I put on lighter strings, I went back in time to when I first started guitar and I used nines. I think I used eights actually at the very beginning. But I remember breaking a lot of strings. And this is kind of funny because a lot of that had to do with never changing strings. Because back when you first start guitar, you let them basically rust out sometimes before you change them. And I change my strings all the time now, so it shouldn't happen. But I kept feeling like I was going to break a string. And a lot of that might have to do with how easy it was to bend the string. It just felt like it could snap at any second. So just personally, I really like the psychological effect of having a little bit heavier strings because I feel like there's more string and it's less likely to break in a important situation like being live on stage. When you're about to go for that epic bend, the last thing you want to do is be worried that the string's going to break. So it's funny how much of this is psychological to me, but switching gauges really did a number to me mentally. I also noticed that on this particular guitar that I was going out of tune way more with lighter strings. It was just a little bit, but it was enough to force me to have to tune between each song. And even though I have a guitar that has locks on it and shouldn't go out of tune very much, there was still a little bit more going out of tune than what was happening when I had 10 gauge strings. So I don't know, I'm not a guitar luthier, I don't know the exact mechanics of it all, but I did notice that that was happening. And once again, when you're on stage, you don't want to be tuning all the time. And I like the peace of mind knowing that my guitar is at least going to be in tune. So even though I just mentioned I like it when my guitar fights me back a little bit, I don't like it when it fights me back by going out of tune. That's not one of the fights I want to have, especially when I'm on stage. So having it go out of tune just a little bit with lighter gauge strings forced me a little bit to change my mind and to go back up to 10s. And I think the biggest reason why I went back to 10 gauge strings is because I actually felt like my fingers were getting weaker. It's kind of like I didn't give them as much of a workout when I played. So at first that sounds like it'd be a relief because you don't have to work so hard to get through a show. But what I noticed is that my fingers actually felt like they were getting a little bit more weak. And so I would play licks that I was used to, and my pinky just wasn't feeling strong anymore. And I thought, well, that must be exactly like, when you stop doing push ups for a couple weeks or something and you go back to them and you just feel really weak. That's what my fingers were feeling like. And I always want to feel like I'm improving if I can. So I feel like if I go back to the 10 gauge strings, I'm going to start to get that strength back and quickness back in my fingers that I lacked with lighter strings. It doesn't mean I'm going to go up to 11s and 12s like a bodybuilder wants to keep improving with their weights, but I want to get to the point where I feel the most confident in my left hand strength and quickness. So I'm gonna see how that goes. I just put the tens back on the other day, but I already feel like I'm getting a little bit of a workout, so that's a good sign. So you might have gotten from this video that a lot of this was psychological. Having lighter strings made me do different things I normally wouldn't do, but for you it might be a whole different gauge string that does that for you. So if you're used to, like, for example, 9 gauge strings, that might be your threshold, that everything feels good when you bend, you have to pick a certain way and it works for you at nines. You don't get the buzz because you actually pick a little lighter than I do possibly. Or maybe you use 11s. I tried that one time, that was tough. But that might be your threshold. So I really recommend trying different gauges out, at least in the beginning, just to see what really fits your style. And then on top of that, one of the most important things is when you do switch your string gauges, be sure to bring it into somebody who knows how to set up your guitar properly. Because I made the mistake of putting on heavier gauge strings when I was younger, and I didn't get my guitar set up, and it was just out of control, crazy hard to play. And I'm like, how does anybody play with 11s? But it turns out that when it was set up properly, it wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be. But it was still too much to where I wanted to go back to 10s. So try to find your threshold, your personal comfort zone as far as string gauge goes, and it can make guitar playing a lot better for you. Not just easier, but psychologically better, because all the ducks will be in a row for you for your particular circumstance, and all of a sudden everything seems to click. All right, I hope that helps some of you guys out. Write down at the bottom in the comments, let me know what gauge string you guys play, and let me know if you ever successfully changed to a different gauge string and what you noticed about that. All right, thanks a lot. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.